Hello and welcome to the Zawya podcast. I'm Brinda Darasha and today I'm talking to Khawaja Aftab Ahmed, who is the International Finance Corporation's Regional Director for the Middle East, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. We'll be talking about the corporation's efforts to develop the region's private sector and also act as a catalyst for poverty reduction. Aftab, welcome.
Thank you, Brinda. Thanks for having me.
Would you give us a brief overview of your activities in the region, particularly the Middle East and North Africa?
So I cover Middle East, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. This is a region which is 15 countries, six GCC countries, and nine countries in Middle East, seven countries in Middle East, and then Pakistan, Afghanistan. So you can see from the composition of countries, it's most of the countries are fragile, low-income countries. We talk about Yemen, you talk about Palestine, Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan. So it's a very challenging but very exciting region. So we have been focusing on this region for a long period of time, and IFC restructured a year ago. We just celebrated first anniversary, where this region was carved out in terms of to give more focus, more importance to these Middle East fragile and low-income countries.
So, you said it is the Middle East has uneven levels of prosperity and development, right? We know that.
Yeah.
How do you ensure the investment support you provide is reaching the underserved business segments and not just those in sectors like manufacturing, energy, and power, which find it relatively easier to access mainstream credit markets?
So our focus has been like what we saw. One thing in these smaller and fragile markets is access to finance, and women in business is one of the lowest. So our focus has been for focusing on micro SME financing, providing gender financing. So I can give you a few examples. Like in Palestine, recently we committed a $5 million transaction to Vitas. And as you know, 95% of the businesses firms are micro or small enterprises. So this $5 million will leverage and help in terms of reaching out to many underserved firms which didn't have any access to finance. Similar, you can find out a lot of other, like we did SME and MSME financing through our bank relationships. Most of our financing, when we provide credit lines to banks, these are not plain vanilla credit lines. Usually the focus is on solving the problems in those countries or in those regions, mostly access of funding to small and medium enterprise, gender financing, climate. So we make sure we do a diagnostic of the country or the region, and then structure our financing based on the needs of the country.
Yeah, so that was one of my questions. See, with the cost of funds rising across the globe due to the monetary tightening, countries with lower credit ratings, of which some are there in the Middle East, definitely, will find it very difficult to access funds, right? Do you see IFC ramping up its public-private partnerships in such countries? And is blended finance a sustainable and viable option here?
Definitely. I think you have touched on two very, very important subjects. Number one, you mentioned about PPP. I think PPP is not only relevant to these small or high risk countries, but also countries in GCC. So if you see the profile of the countries, most of these countries does not have fiscal space to allocate sovereign funding for development, whether it's roads, whether it's transport or logistics or airports. So PPP comes very handy, and we have been focusing on PPP in the region, and there are many examples. So in Jordan, recently we will be closing public sector school PPP on schools in Jordan. We are working on expansion of King Hussein Bridge in Jordan. The other issue is, I fully agree that many of these economies are high risk, and normal plain vanilla financing is very difficult to attract. So that's why the role of blended finance comes very handy. And you may know that IFC is one of the largest implementer of blended finance over the last many years. We provided through our donors $3.1 billion of blended finance, and which leverage are around 17 billion plus of financing. So blended finance in the form of, because local currency is lacking in these countries, so it helps in terms of providing local currency. Pricing becomes a challenge, so it helps in terms of subsidizing the pricing. Sometimes the viability, there is viability gap due to risk, and we use blended finance to address that. So you rightly mentioned it's very difficult to, without blended finance or risk mitigative tools, to provide funding to some of these very challenging economies.
Where would you say this blended financing is mostly being deployed? In which countries?
I think we're deploying not only in this region but across the globe. So it is, we use recently, I'll give you example. With last year we did a very, I think, landmark project addressing food security in Yemen. Provided $75 million financing to Hail Said group in Yemen. And without blended finance, this project would have not been possible.
What is the extent of IFC's involvement within the GCC?
IFC has been quite active in GCC. So it's very difficult because of the high income. So you see GCC, within GCC there are different different sectors and different level of development. So you find Oman from $15,000 to Qatar about $60,000. So we have been focusing on GCC on, I think, four important targets. One is we worked with large conglomerates in GCC, helping them to become regional champions. So that helps us deploying high liquidity in GCC in some of the challenging market is Middle East, Africa, and Asia. And then the second thing is we have been helping GCC in terms of opening up markets, reforms, women in business, and PPP. So that's the second pillar. The third pillar, which is very important, is climate finance. And you have seen that a lot more awareness has been created. So UAE last 15 years was the single largest emitter per capita, carbon emitter per capita. And now they have come up with a goal by 2050 they will be the lowest carbon emitter per capita. So they have come up with large programs, and as you may know, UAE will be hosting COP28 next year, which shows you the commitment of the UAE government. On the other side, Saudi Arabia has come up under the 2030 vision, has come up with the very ambitious greening the economy project, which is almost $500 billion. So we are helping them on the climate finance side in terms of investment. A lot of these companies like Aqua Power, Masdar, Averda, these are all green financing, helping them to invest outside the region. And then the last pillar is financial inclusion, which we see even these high income countries in terms of have low access to finance as far as come to lower income segment of some of these countries. So financial inclusion, which includes gender finance and digital financing. So these are our main four pillars.
IFC recently launched a venture capital fund to finance technology startups in Africa, the Middle East, and Pakistan, right? Obviously, you see great opportunities there. Could you give us some details?
This is a very exciting opportunity, frankly speaking, and I'm very passionate about it. The issue is, if you see one common thread in the region is bulge of youth population. This has the highest youth population in across the globe. And this can create opportunity in terms of if you help the youth in terms of on the employment side, or otherwise, if you remember the reason for Arab Spring in the last decade was high youth unemployment. So that's why this is a very exciting opportunity. It's a 225 million platform focusing on Africa, Middle East, Central Asia, and Turkey. And these regions are one of the lowest in terms of availability of VC funding. So just to give you an example, in 2021, these regions attracted only 2% of 640 billion of global VC funding. And with the recent turmoil post COVID-19 and Ukraine war, there has been slowdown in global VC funding. So we wanted to help these youth startups, help them grow into scalable ventures that can that can attract mainstream equity and debt. So a lot of handholding will be required, but we are getting a lot of interest. So a lot of tech startups are approaching IFC, and we're creating a very good pipeline going forward. We will be focusing on technological innovations in climate, healthcare, education, agri, and e-commerce. And we feel that MENA, Middle East, North Africa tech, and boost GDP by approximately 40% or 1.6 trillion, and create 1.5 million jobs over the next decade. On Pakistan, I think Pakistan has lagged behind on digital transformation compared to its neighbors, India and some other countries, or East Asia, Vietnam, and others. So we have seen a really growth in digital transformation in Pakistan. So we feel that digital transformation could unlock about 60 billion in economic value to about 19% of GDP in the next decade. So that's why this is opportunity, this program, and this program will come up with $50 million of World Bank facility for more fragile and low income countries. So this can, if deployed well, I think this can create a catalytic role in terms of a lot of similar funding coming from other donors and multilateral.
What are some of the challenges faced by multilateral agencies like the IFC?
I think not directly we don't face challenges, but the issue is the region is challenging. So you see this region has the most political instability, the most impacted by COVID-19, more impacted by the war in Ukraine on food security. So as our CEO Makhtar said that this is new normal. So one that will require new partnerships and create mindsets to pave way for a more sustainable, resilient, and inclusive future. So we don't see things, the inflation rates are high, sovereign debts are going up. So we don't see things normalizing. So we have to really adjust, not us, but all other multilateral adjust in terms of addressing these gaps and providing solutions to the market.
Sadly, that's all we have time for. Thank you,
Mhm.
Aftab, for taking the time for us.
Brenda, thanks a lot. I think thanks. It was a good discussion.
Thank you. You have been listening to the Zawya podcast.